Hi, I'm Sabrina Shelley. I am from Lake Worth ISD and I teach English 1. This is an example of a think aloud for a comprehension article reading. So I'm going to delve right in. I'm going to be acting as a student, so all my thought processes will be me thinking as if I was a student reading this for the first time. So I'm going to make my key, so that way I have a way of tracking myself. So I'm going to have my dates and names in green. My main points, or anytime I answer or talk about a question, in yellow. Any evidence I need to support those main points will be in orange. I'm just going to put evidence. And every time I come across unfamiliar words, I'm going to make those pink. Okay. So going and starting reading The American Revolution, Political Upheaval Led to U.S. Independence. So my title, I know I'm talking about the American Revolution, so I know America is my main topic. Political, this word reminds me of government. Upheaval reminds me of uprising. Kind of think of like Hunger Games when they tried to overtake the government there. Led to the U.S. independence. So I know that this political upheaval, so some uprising within the government, is going to lead, which means take me to, the U.S. independence, which means freedom. So the U.S. is going to gain freedom from some entity, so because of this political upheaval. So that kind of spurs me on to my thinking of like, what am I going to be reading about, or why am I reading this text? And so these questions pop in my head. I know that there's going to be some kind of political upheaval, so there's going to be some kind of government uprising from the U.S. or the people who once make up the U.S. So my first question is, how does the U.S. get independence? And based off of that first question, how does the U.S. get independence? I'm thinking, okay, so who are they getting this independence from? Who are they getting independence from? Okay, and then I'm also thinking like in the Hunger Games, or as my kind of modern example, I'm thinking like, so I know that they had reasons for why they wanted to get independence. They didn't just, do it or try to get it from somebody because they hated them, but there was reasons. So why do they want this independence? Okay, so I have my three questions. How does the U.S. get independence? Who are they getting that independence from? And why do they want independence? So as I'm reading, I'm going to be keeping my track of my comprehension based off of these three questions. So I'm going to read, and I'm going to stop every 2 to 3 sentences to kind of fill what I'm thinking about those sections. So the American Revolution, 1775 to 83, is also known as the American Revolutionary War and the U.S. War of Independence. The conflict arose from growing tensions between residents of Great Britain's 13 Northern American colonies and the colonial government, which represented the British Crown. So I have three titles or 3 names for this American Revolution. So my first sentence, I'm given the American Revolution, I'm given American Revolutionary War, and the U.S. War of Independence. Okay, I know this because it says also known by, so I know that I have 3 different names, so every time I see one of these 3 names, I can refer back to this war. So this is the different titles of the same war for independence. So I'm making my note, the different titles of the same war for independence, so that way I remind myself when I'm looking at these 3 anywhere else in the text, I know that this is the same war for the independence. Okay. I also know that kind of going into my questions here, that the conflict arose from growing tensions between residents of Great Britain's 13 North American colonies and the colonial government, okay, which represented the British Crown. So I have my who. My who did this. Who were we? Is the United States fighting against? So I'm going to use my green again for Great Britain and the British Crown, because that's the same entity, and then the colonial government. So those are my two faculties here. So I know the Britain's 13 North American colonies is my first people. Then that means that, and the colonial government. It means the colonial government, or colonial, is referring to the United States. So I'm going to put U.S. for United States above colonial government. So that way I know when I see colonial government, I'm referring to America or U.S. And then British Crown is telling me that I'm referring to Great Britain. Okay. So this is going to be my question. Who? I'm going to write who, so I know that that's who I'm talking about. Who are they getting independence from? We're getting independence from Great Britain. Skirmishes between British troops and colonial militiamen in Lexington and Concord in April 1775 kicked off the armed conflict, and by following summer, the rebels were waging a full-scale war of their independence. France entered the American Revolution on the side of the colonists in 1778, turning what had essentially been a civil war into an international conflict. After French assistance helped the Continental Army force the British surrender at Yorktown, Virginia in 1781, the Americans had effectively won their independence, though fighting would not formally end until 1783. Okay, so a lot of information, I have a lot of dates. I'm thinking, let's see, when did this start? So when did this war start? We have April of 1775 kicked off the armed conflict. So that tells me that this is when it started. Our war formally started then here, or start date. Okay. When did we see the independence take effect, or when did we they kind of analyzed that, and they said in 1781 is the Americans had effectively won their independence. So by 1781 we get to the main point of this article, which was the U.S. getting their independence. So I know that this is kind of where the independence started. I'm going to put independence start. Okay. What kind of triggered that, what date triggered that independence? It was in 1778 when the France entered the American Revolutionary War. So we know that it says he entered on the colonist side. So remember colonists, I remember colonists are the U.S. So I need to make sure I write that down. So I have my colonists, which is U.S. So France entered American Revolutionary War on the colonist side in 1778. So these are some important notes for me to make. So if I needed to make a timeline on this, I could write out these dates to kind of see how that would work. So there's not really much else I need from this section. But it does kind of lead me to think of some more main points. So I know that after the assistance, French assistance helped the Continental Army force the British surrender at Yorktown, Virginia, which led to their independence. This makes me think of some other questions. How does that help? So this answers how. So this answers how the U.S. gained independence. It makes me think, why did the French, I'm not just going to help somebody just because, right? There's usually a purpose for helping someone. So why did the French help? And if they didn't help, would the United States have gotten that independence? If they didn't, would America be here today? So those are some things that kind of make me think about, other than just what I'm seeing. I'm like, okay, I know how they got their independence, obviously because the French assisted them. But why did the French help? And if they didn't help, would we have America today? Those are some things that I'm thinking about as I'm reading because of the conversation that's being presented.